shit was rigged. Like, the Indiana Fever fought so hard, but like, they literally had 8 injured players. They had 8 injured players, and Aliyah Boston fouled out for phantom fouls, and they still got to overtime. Like, you can't deny that. Like, you can't, like, the Indiana, they did everything in their power to try to rig that game in regulation, and Indiana just didn't go away.
You just heard the raw emotion of a fan base that feels like they were robbed. And for weeks, the story has been about one game, one bad night, one controversial series. But what if I told you that the rigging of Game 5 wasn't the start of the crime, it was just the moment they finally got caught? Many of you watching have been piecing this together for weeks, and you were onto something massive. This was never about a few bad calls. This was the explosive result of a league-wide officiating crisis, a secret coaches' rebellion, and a desperate cover-up by Commissioner Cathy Engelbert's office that has finally been exposed. Today, we're not just going to show you how the Fever versus Aces game was compromised. We're going to connect the dots and prove that the league knew this disaster was coming and chose to silence anyone who tried to stop it. We are a community of narrative analysts here, and this is the kind of investigation we live for. So if you believe in filtering out the noise to get to the truth, do me a solid and smash that like button right now. It's a huge signal to us that we are on the right track. All right, let's get into the cover-up. The official story the WNBA wants you to believe is that their officiating is fine. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert has publicly defended the system, stating that every play is scrutinized. The league projects an image of control and competence, but the evidence from Game 5 paints a very different picture. The game was a statistical anomaly. The Indiana Fever were called for 25 fouls. The Las Vegas Aces lived at the free throw line, and the breaking point, the moment that ignited the entire firestorm, came with just 26 seconds left in a tied game. The Aliyah Boston, the Fever's all-star center, was called for her 6th foul on what looked to be a routine rebound battle. She was out of the game. The call was challenged, and the call stood. It was the single most impactful decision of the game, and to millions watching, it felt less like a judgment call and more like an execution. This moment, combined with the lopsided foul count, became Exhibit A in the case that this game wasn't fair. But this single exhibit isn't the whole story. To understand the cover-up, you have to realize this fire had been raging long before Game 5. To see the full picture, we have to rewind the tape. The WNBA Officiating Crisis of 2025 didn't start in the semifinals. It had been simmering all season, and the first person to truly blow the lid off the entire thing wasn't from Indiana or Las Vegas. It was Minnesota Lynx head coach Cheryl Reeve. Just days before the Fever Aces series reached its controversial climax, Reeve stood at a podium after a playoff game and did the unthinkable. She declared war on the league's leadership. She wasn't just mad about a few calls. She was indicting the entire system. In a comment that sent shockwaves through the league, she said that for the league's leadership to deem her game's officiating crew as semifinal playoff worthy was, and I'm quoting her directly, fucking malpractice. Let's be clear about what that means. Malpractice isn't a word you throw around lightly. It implies professional negligence. It suggests a catastrophic failure of duty. Reeve wasn't just saying the refs were bad. She was accusing the league office of being fundamentally incompetent and putting unqualified officials in charge of the most important games of the year. The league's response was swift and severe. They didn't open an investigation. They didn't release a statement acknowledging the concerns. They suspended her. They shut her down, hoping to make an example out of her. The message from the commissioner's office was crystal clear: sit down and be quiet. But they made a fatal miscalculation. They thought they could silence one coach, but they didn't realize they had just lit the fuse on a league-wide rebellion. Because while Cheryl Reeve was serving her suspension, 2 other coaches were watching, and they were about to make the league's cover-up impossible to maintain. This is the part of the story the league prayed would stay buried. This is the dot that connects everything. While the media was focused on Cheryl Reeve's suspension, the WNBA quietly issued 2 more punishments. They levied a $1,000 fine against Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White. And who did they give the exact same fine to? Las Vegas Aces head coach Becky Hammon. Let that sink in. The 2 coaches, who would later be at the center of the most controversial playoff game in recent memory, were both punished by the league for publicly supporting another coach's claim that the officiating was malpractice. This wasn't a secret. It was a public record of dissent. The league's 2 top coaches, on a collision course in the playoffs, were in agreement the officiating was a problem, and they were willing to lose money to say so. Commissioner Engelbert's office wasn't just dealing with one rogue coach anymore. They were facing a unified front. So they did what failing regimes always do. They tried to control the narrative through force. They fined them, hoping the financial penalty would be enough to buy their silence. They tried to quash the rebellion before it could spread, but in doing so, they revealed their entire strategy. This was no longer about fixing a problem, it was about covering it up. It was about maintaining the illusion of control, even as their most respected coaches were screaming that the system was broken. Now, let me ask you, as fellow narrative analysts, do you really believe it's a coincidence that the 2 coaches the league punished for speaking out against bad officiating just happened to be the ones who ended up in a Game 5 meltdown defined by bad officiating? Let me know your theory in the comments. So, if the league was actively suppressing its own coaches, we have to ask the most important question: why? Why would Commissioner Engelbert risk a full-blown crisis and the integrity of the playoffs? The answer, as it often does, comes down to the narrative. Okay, let's filter through some of the noise here, because this is where we get into the speculation that has been lighting up social media. The dominant theory is that the league had a vested interest in a Las Vegas Aces victory. The Aces were the 2-time defending champions, a dynasty in the making. They are the league's poster team, a marketable powerhouse that draws attention. A 4th finals appearance in 6 years just looks good for the league. An upstart, injury-riddled Indiana Fever team, while a great story, doesn't carry the same weight. Protecting the dynasty narrative at any cost becomes the unofficial mandate. And if you think that sounds cynical, look at what that cost actually was. This wasn't just about a trophy. The league's failure to manage this crisis had devastating, real-world consequences for the players on the court. During that Game 5, Fever star Kelsey Mitchell collapsed. This wasn't a simple cramp. She was hospitalized and later revealed she suffered from rhabdomyolysis, a severe condition, where muscle cells literally break down and release damaging proteins into the bloodstream. She described a numbness, paralyzing feeling with no movement from my lower extremities. This is the human cost of the cover-up, and here is the most damning piece of evidence: the coaches had warned the league this was coming. Remember that fine against Becky Hammon? It was for supporting Cheryl Reeve, who was suspended for her comments about officiating. In her own comments, Hammon had stated, "The physicality is out of control, that's for sure." She was telling the league directly that the referees were letting games get too dangerous. The commissioner's office heard the warning, took her money, and did nothing. And the result was a star player being rushed to the hospital with a terrifying medical condition. So when we put all the pieces on the table, the picture becomes horrifyingly clear. The rigged Game 5 wasn't an anomaly, it was an inevitability. It was the predictable, public implosion of a system that was already broken. The league, led by Commissioner Kathy Engelbert, was warned repeatedly by its most respected coaches that the officiating was reaching a crisis point. Instead of listening, instead of reforming, they chose to punish the whistleblowers and cover up the problem. They prioritized a clean media narrative over the integrity of the game and the safety of their players. The blown calls, the lopsided fouls, and the devastating injuries in that final game weren't the disease, they were the symptoms of a rot that started at the very top. They didn't just get caught rigging a game, they got caught ignoring a rebellion. So, what's your take on all this? We want to know who you think is truly responsible for the Game 5 meltdown. Drop a comment below telling us if you think the blame lies with the on-court referees or with Commissioner Engelbert's office for creating the crisis in the first place. If you believe the story behind the story is what really matters, and you value this kind of deep dive investigation, make sure you're subscribed with all notifications turned on. We are committed to filtering out the noise, and you don't want to miss what we uncover next. Finally, if you know another fan who only saw the bad calls but not the cover-up, share this video. Every narrative analyst deserves to be in on the real conversation.